There are over 230 cards between the Origins, Proving Ground, and Spirit Forge sets which directly show off champions, their abilities, and the items of League of Legends. And today, we're going to be covering how RIftbound represents all of them in their cards. And like a bunch more when it comes to specific locations, side characters, and all that good stuff, but look, this video is long enough, so for today, we are solely going to be focusing on the champions, abilities, and items. If you want more, leave a like, subscribe, and a comment down below, and maybe I'll look at the other stuff in the future. But like I said, we have a boatload of cards to get into, so let's not waste any time and jump right into it, starting with the items, as they're the easiest to highlight. Though we are going to be keeping the champion-specific items for later. While most items have some kind of flavor or extra detail going for them, sometimes you just need a big fucking sword, making the BF sword our most basic entry and decent spot to start out in this video. And also, it comes first alphabetically, so that helps as well. When it comes to most physical attackers in League of Legends, the BF Sword is kind of that first big purchase that they want to build because it gives so many stats, which is exactly what we get in RIftbound, a 4 energy equipment that gives 3 might, turning anything that it's attached to into something that is ready to rumble. The Blade of the Ruin King is one of the go-to tank-killing items in League, doing % damage of opponent's health and healing the user on each hit. And the card for this reflects the latter part of that. To equip the BF Sword, you need to sacrifice a friendly unit, draining their strength and empowering the one that it's being equipped to. Outside of the actual item in League though, this is Viego's sword, and it is heavily tied to the Ruination, which heavily corrupted the Blessed Isles. Also, this card is easily my favorite art in Spirit Forge, absolutely gorgeous, with it showing the moment before Viego, the soon-to-be ruined king, is stabbed by Isolde and sinks into the water, turning the blessed water into the black mist that triggers the Ruination. Very cool. Boots of Swiftness are typically the go-to boot options for going fast. There is technically one pair of boots that are faster, but that is only active outside of combat, while Boots of Swiftness are always active, making them great for ganking other lanes, and hey, the RIftbound boots give ganking. Back to our bonking sticks though, and we have the Brutalizer, an equipment in RIftbound which gives an extra burst of might on the turn that it's equipped. This is a less direct tie-in than some of the others, but Brutalizer in League is an item that gives attack damage, ability haste, and lethality stats, making it a great option for bursting down your opponents early on. And I think that kind of fits for the most part. Catalyst of Aeons allows players to channel 2 runes or draw a card if they're unable to do so. This is based on the item in League, which currently restores mana based on the amount of damage that you take, and heals based on the amount of mana that you spend. So it remains to be a massive resource generator in both games. Now every stat has a basic item that builds into just about everything in that category, and for armor in League, that item is the Cloth Armor. Fitting to this, its RIftbound counterpart is a cheap equipment that gives 2 shield to whatever unit it's attached to. It also has Quick Draw, which we will later talk about in the Longsword card as well, so that might be something they associate with these basic items. Even so, Cloth Armor isn't typically a starting item, and these next 4 are more of what people tend to start with. First of which is the Cull. This is an equipment in RIftbound that allows you to make a gold whenever the unit that it's attached to conquers. Similarly, Cull is an item in League of Legends that gives you 1 gold every time you kill a minion up to 100. And once you've hit that threshold, the Cull will sell for a big chunk of change, so in either version you can generate gold with this item. Keeping on with these starting items, and we have Doran's Blade, Doran's Ring, and Doran's Shield. These typically are used by physical champions, magic champions, and tanks respectively, and in each case, they offer some kind of resource. The Blade gives you some lifesteal, the Ring lets you recoup your mana, and the Shield lets you heal whenever you take damage. So let's take a look at their cards. Doran's Blade is the basic equipment in RIftbound, simply being a 2 energy gear that gives 2 might, helping the unit stay alive in fights, just like it does in League. Doran's Ring lets you discard and draw whenever that unit conquers, cycling through your resources, which is kind of similar to giving you more mana to help you cast more spells, I guess. And finally, Doran's Shield turns your unit into a tank, which is pretty fitting. Edge of Night is a pretty unique item in League. It is a super aggressive item that also gives you a spell shield to block 1 incoming ability per minute, give or take. So in RIftbound, we have it as an equipment that just gives stats. However, it also allows you to play it from hidden, surprising your opponent and potentially allowing your unit to survive something that would have killed it otherwise. And the fact that you can play it at reaction speed this way means that it will let you beat out a spell in most cases as well. On to Experimental Hexplate, and this is a strange one, at least on the surface. The Hexplate is a League item that gives you a bit of attack speed, and a bit of health. So why does the Riftbound version turn the unit into a mech? Well, that's just kind of a flavor thing. The Hexplate's unique ability is Overdrive, giving you some speed when you cast your ult. But the word overdrive is typically associated with a machine being put into a higher gear, so we kind of have that mech machine theme going on there. Now, not an item that you can actually buy in League, but the Eye of the Herald is a reward that you can get for killing the Rift Herald, and it lets you summon the Rift Herald to help you overrun your opponent's towers. Now, that might feel a little bit more significant than creating a 1 might recruit token whenever a unit moves, which is what this item does in Riftbound, but the idea of summoning something is still present. Guardian Angel is an equipment in Riftbound that allows a unit to dodge death 1 time and destroys itself instead, and the League version is pretty much the same thing, letting whoever buys it come back to life once every 5 minutes when they would have died otherwise. Though luckily, in League it doesn't destroy itself each time this happens. Hex Drinker is kind of similar to the Edge of Night in that it's an offensive item in League with a defensive benefit. In this case, if you are low on health and take magic damage, it'll give you a temporary shield. So how do we reflect that in Riftbound? Well, by making the unit difficult to target with spells and giving it deflect. Like Cloth Armor, Longsword is another basic item, this time for attack damage. And like Cloth Armor again, it also has Quick Draw, though rather than giving shield, it gives a flat 2 might bonus. Now on to Poro Snacks, which is not a typical item in League. Instead, it is given to players on the Howling Abyss map, and players are able to feed them to the Poros walking around to make them grow bigger. However, if you overfeed them, they will explode into a bunch of smaller Poros, but either way, it doesn't really have an impact on you as a player. Though there is bonus points if you're Braum, as you also give the Poros a mustache when you feed them. That's kind of cute. But as this doesn't actually have a real effect in League, the Riftbound version is completely unique and lets you draw a card whenever you play it, as well as if you want to pay to destroy it. Our next item is the Recurve Bow. In League, this gives the holder a bit of attack speed and some bonus damage whenever they hit something. And this is translated to Riftbound really well, as it lets the unit holding it hit the opponent for 2 damage whenever they attack or defend. Effectively, this is attack speed and damage. It even brings over the fact that the bow doesn't give any actual attack stats to the champion, as it gives a flat 0 might, which is kind of perfect. Serrated Dirk gives the player a chunk of attack damage as well as some lethality. It's honestly pretty similar to the Brutalizer in a lot of ways, and again, we are looking to use this very offensively on burst champions and assassins. So, Serrated Dirk as a card gives a unit Assault 2, which makes them stronger while attacking. Now on to Steric's Gauge, a League item that is a solid mix of offensive and defensive stats. This gives the champion a good amount of health, as well as about half of their base attack damage as bonus attack damage. But where this comes in clutch is its ability Lifeline, which gives you a big shield whenever you would drop to low health, which is represented in the Quick Draw ability, being able to be played from hand in an emergency to keep your units alive. And giving 3 might is a great way to show all of the health and attack that Steric's gives. The Trinity Force is a really interesting item in League's history. It has been all over the place with different designs, but its big feature has always been that it gives a little bit of everything. However, that changed a little while back, and now it gives a lot of physical stats, some ability haste, and a bit of health. But its big feature now is giving a chunk of extra damage to your next auto attack after you use an ability. And it gives you some move speed whenever you hit the enemy as well. Basically, it's all about building momentum, and if you're ahead when you get this, your opponent will struggle to catch up. Riftbound's version keeps that momentum theme, and on top of the basic stat buff, it gives you an extra point if the unit that it's equipped to can manage to hold a battlefield. It's not a one-to-one translation, but I do think it's pretty solid overall. Warmog's armor to me is kind of in the same ballpark of being iconic to League that the Trinity Force is in. In this case, this item gives you 1000 health, and once you hit a certain health threshold, and if you are out of combat for a few seconds, it will begin quickly healing you to full health. The Riftbound version is a bit on the smaller side, only giving 1 might, but it does offer you a buff if that unit conquers. So it does still make you a bit bulkier, and if you can complete a task, you get an extra reward. I think that's pretty okay. World Atlas is the final starting item that we're going to talk about in this, which allows support characters to generate gold by hitting enemies, and allows them to kill minions and share the gold that they would have kept for themselves to their carries. This one is pretty straightforward, and it's a card that allows you to generate 2 gold whenever the equipped unit holds a battlefield. So in both cases, you are generating gold. And our last item is going to be Zhonya's Hourglass. For Riftbound, this is effectively just the same as Guardian Angel, where it revives a unit that would die. However, it can't be equipped and can be hidden instead. This is actually kind of interesting, as Zhonya's is an item that allows a player to enter stasis for a few moments whenever they want to, so that they can dodge incoming damage that would have killed them otherwise. What I like about this though is how it functions differently from the Guardian Angel, despite being so similar. Notably, a player can use the Zhonya stasis at any time they want, adding an element of surprise for the opponents, kind of like being hidden. Whereas the GA will automatically proc and the player doesn't really have any control over that if they die, which is also how it works once equipped in Riftbound as well. Okay, before we get into the actual champions, I feel like I kinda gotta talk about Flash as well. While not an item, Flash is the most iconic summoner spell in the game that just about everyone brings into just about every game. Unless you're Shaco. Shaco doesn't have to worry about this. Flash lets you instantly teleport a short distance away, move over walls, and stay safe from damage. And in Riftbound, Flash is pretty similar, letting a unit move from a battlefield to the base on a reaction speed spell. However, this card actually lets you move 2 units, which makes it a bit more functional. Alright, on to the champions, and we're starting out with Ahri. And just a heads up, not all of the cards are perfect or straightforward representations. Some need a little bit of wiggle room or liberty, but I think in general, most are pretty decent reflections of the characters, their stories, or abilities in some way or another. As her legend card suggests, Ahri is a 9-tailed fox, more specifically a Vastaya, which as a huge oversimplification are League's animal-people hybrids. In Ahri's case, she charms and uses spirit magic to manipulate her enemies while draining their life essence. So I think that her legend ability, boiling down to those who approach lose their might, is extremely fitting. In League, this is typically shown off in her passive, Essence Theft, which drains health whenever she kills anything. And that is actually the theme for most of the cards that feature her. Ahri Inquisitive weakens those who come into contact with her in the same way, and the longer that she has control, the weaker her target becomes, which is shown off by the card Ahri Alluring, who scores an extra point when she holds a battlefield. Several of her abilities are also shown off in Riftbound as well though. Firstly, Ahri has a magical conduit called the Orb of Deception, though the actual name hasn't been stated, and we often call it that because that's the name of her Q. The orb itself, though, is sometimes also called the Orb of Destruction. Riftbound, though, gives us a gear called the Orb of Regret with Ahri in its art, which lets you choose an enemy unit and lower its might by 1 for the turn. It is the regret and guilt that Ahri feels for stealing other people's life essence. Ahri's W is Foxfire, which involves her making 3 spiritual flames that jump out and attack enemies that get too close to her. And obviously her signature spell has a very similar vibe, a spell that kills up to 4 might worth of units at a battlefield. However, it can also be played from hidden, which brings in that if they get too close factors that needs to be at a battlefield. And of course, Ahri also appears on Charm, named after her E. If this ability hits an opponent, they lose control of themselves for a short period and are forced to move towards her, which is pretty in line with moving an enemy unit to any spot of your choosing. From Ahri, we move on to Akshan, who doesn't have a legend card yet, but did get a champion card in Spiritforged. Akshan Mischievous is a card that picks up an equipment with his Weapon Master ability, and allows you to invest some power into stealing a gear from your opponents while he is on the board. Akshan's story largely revolves around his weapon, the Absolver. If a murderer is killed by this weapon, it will revive the last person that they killed. Akshan's mentor Shadia went to Shreeman warlords asking for them to turn over their relic weapons to the Sentinels of Light so that they could fend off the incoming ruination. But these warlords refused to give up their weapons and killed her instead. So Akshan sets out to find her killer, take them out, and recover the Sentinel weapons along the way, which is why we see him stealing equipment here. Anivia is the first of the 3 Freljordian demigods that we're going to talk about today, and she appears on Omnivia Primal, which deals 3 damage to each enemy unit at a battlefield that she attacks, which is similar to her ultimate ability, Glacial Storm, which places a large ring of ice that deals damage to any enemy that steps into it. Now on to another champion with a legend package, and we have Annie, the Darkchild. And I should mention here that Annie is part of the Proving Ground set alongside Garen, Lux, and Master Yi. These cards were intentionally simplified and are more focused on being new player friendly and functional rather than actually being representative of the character's lore or abilities. That isn't to say that they don't show off the character, but that can take a backseat to the idea of teaching people how to actually play the game. For example, if we look at her champion cards, Our first entry is Ahri Fiery, which boosts your spell and ability damage by 1. Again, this is more functional than anything, but Ahri is basically a crazy powerful fire mage, so boosting magic is just a simple way of connecting that. It's not directly flavorful though, it's just kind of generic mage ability. Similarly, Ahri Stubborn returns a spell from your trash to your hand when she gets played. Not really a reference to Ahri's kit at all, just a simple mechanic to work with. If you really want to stretch it, her Q does refund some of its cooldown when it kills a unit, but that's pretty loose. But we do get some flavor as we get into her legend card though. Ahri's legend ability allows her to ready 2 runes at the end of the turn, which brings us more directly into her Q ability, Disintegrate. This involves her throwing a fireball at an enemy, and if it kills a unit, you get a bit of a refund on both her ability's cooldown and mana cost, and that mana section is like readying your runes. Disintegrate also gets its own card along these lines, being a spell that deals damage and then rewards you by letting you draw a card if you kill something. Oddly, the art of this seems to be showing off her E instead though, so I don't know what happened there. Ahri's W is Incinerate, which also gets a card, but it's more of a generic deal damage spell. Firestorm functions similarly, though this adds in a little bit of flavor. Ahri has this nasty habit of burning down everything and everyone around her, so hitting every enemy unit at a battlefield is pretty reasonable to describe that. And lastly, Ahri's signature spell is all about her ultimate, Tibbers. Ahri was given a teddy bear that was protected by her mother's magic, which allowed the bear to survive her flames. This magic fused with her own fire, and ultimately she became able to transform Tibbers into a giant flaming bear whenever she gets angry. In League, Tibbers appears from a burst of flames that hits everyone around it, which is why the card deals 3 damage to all units at a battlefield the same way that Firestorm does, but on a big ol' bear body. Now moving away from the Proving Ground set, and we get to Aphelios Exalted. Aphelios is a champion known for his passive more than anything else really. Basically, he has 5 different Moonstone weapons that were created by his sister, and once he runs out of ammo in one of those weapons, he will cycle into the next down the line. Each of these has their own unique abilities and uses, and that's why we see Aphelios Exalted being a card that focuses on attaching equipment to him and rewarding you by letting you choose a different effect when you do so. Our next champion doesn't have an actual champion card at all yet, but their abilities do feature on a few. Aurelian Soul is a big space dragon who creates stars and galaxies, and brings us both Singularity and Falling Star. In League, Singularity creates a black hole that pulls in enemies and then deals damage to them. It will even execute enemies that reach the center if they have low health, so this card bursts multiple enemy units for 6 damage each. Falling Star is named after his E, which calls down a star to deal damage to his enemies, which essentially boils down to a smaller version of Singularity in card form. Yet another legend is Azir. Azir was the last emperor of the ancient Shuriman Empire who was murdered by Xerath during a ritual to become ascended, which would have given him unbelievable power. This attack led to an explosion that destroyed Shurima and buried the Sun Disk in an instant though. However, thousands of years later, he was resurrected when his descendant Sivir entered the ruins where she was attacked. Her blood revived Azir, and when he chose to save her, his selflessness triggered his ascension anyways, which gave him the power to control sand and create soldiers out of it, as well as raising the Sun Disk. So let's start with his legend card. Azir, Emperor of the Sands, allows you to make a sand soldier if you've played an equipment, and it even lets those soldiers pick up those weapons to take on your enemies. And many of the cards that feature Azir also feature his soldiers. His signature spell, Arise, is based on his W in League, which lets him create a sand soldier. But this idea is also followed through on Guards and Desert's Call as well. Now for the next few, I feel like we gotta talk about Azir's iconic combo in League, the Shuriman Shuffle. Basically, his W lets him make a soldier, his Q lets him move it, and his E lets him dash to those soldiers. And this idea of motion is seen in both of his champion cards. Azir Ascendant allows him to swap spaces with one of his other units, while Azir Sovereign pulls his soldiers into combat with him. And together they kind of make the image of that Shuriman Shuffle effect. As for his ultimate, Emperor's Divide, this has him summoning a wall of soldiers that push back his enemies and stop them from approaching, which gets translated into the ability to pull any of your units from a battlefield back to your base and create some distance from the enemy. And of course, we also have the Sun Disk, which, as I mentioned, is the Shuriman monument that transforms mortals into gods. Or in Riftbound's case, it readies them whenever they enter. And finally, Imperial Decree is a card that makes it so that if any unit is damaged during that turn, they are killed, which, if I had to guess, is related to the moment that the ritual was disrupted and Shurima was destroyed. However, the art on the card shows off the already ascended Azir summoning his army, so I don't know, but the card's fun to use at least. Now on to a contender for League of Legends Best Celestial Boy, Bard. For the purpose of this video, all we really gotta know about Bard is that he's able to make portals with his E, Magical Journey. This lets him, his allies, and even his enemies travel from one spot to another, and even pass through solid objects. And his card, Bard Mercurial, follows through on this. By exhausting your legend when you play him, Bard allows you to send any of your units to an open battlefield, kind of making a portal for them to pass through. Now another best boy contender who canonically doesn't exist anymore thanks to Arcane is Blitzcrank. But that's a whole other bucket of bolts that we'll get into at another point. So for now, all you gotta know is about his Q, Rocket Grab, which launches out his hand and yanks back any enemy that it hits, pulling them back to his location and basically setting them up to die. So when Blitzcrank impassive enters a battlefield, he will pull an enemy unit to him. That said, he also returns to his owner's hand when he holds, but I like to think of this as being related to Hex Flash. This is a modified version of the Flash Summoner spell that Blitzcrank is pretty known to take, which basically lets him use it more often, but requires him to stand still for a moment to channel it. So he pops in, hooks an enemy, and once he's managed to sit still for a minute, he will return to your hand so he can pop in all over again. And keeping on that Piltover and Zaun theme, we finally get to Caitlyn. She is the Sheriff of Piltover and uses a Hextech empowered sniper rifle, which is most famously used in her ultimate, Ace in a Hole, which can be used to pick off enemies from long distances. Caitlyn Patrolling is a card that shows this off by giving her the ability to exhaust herself and deal damage to enemy units at other battlefields. She also features in the art of Smokescreen, which doesn't actually stem from any League of Legends ability, and instead is a reference to Arcane, where her and her squad of enforcers will lead their attacks with smoke to disorient their targets, in other words, lowering their might. Our next legend that we're going to discuss is going to be Darius, a powerful general of Noxus, and a member of the Triforix alongside Swain and LeBlanc, with each representing might, vision, and guile respectively. A big focus of Darius's cards is the Legion mechanic that focuses on having played other cards earlier in the turn, which makes sense as he leads the Trifarian Legion. So his legend, Darius Hand of Noxus, allows him to make an energy once you've played another card in that turn. The bigger his Legion becomes, the more resources and lands he can conquer, and that kind of leads into it. And both of his champion cards also involve being ready for battle with that Legion. Darius Executioner comes in ready when Legion is active, and boosts your army by 1 might when they are fighting with him, while Darius Trifarian becomes readied and strengthened when you play your second card in a turn, meeting Legion's requirement. As for actual League to Riftbound translation, we can look at Darius's ultimate, Noxian Guillotine. This is an executing ability that will reset when it kills something so that you can kill another enemy and another and another. In Riftbound, this is Darius's signature spell, which marks a unit to be killed when they take damage or will actually kill them if Legion is active. I kinda like this, as the ability does more damage in League if the character is bleeding, which is kinda like them being marked for death in a way, and has this requirement which allows you to actually kill the unit if there's some prep work done before actually using it. Finally, it's not an exact connection, but Darius's axe does appear in Cleave, which is also pretty much the art for his E, Apprehend, but rotated a little bit. This is an ability which both pulls an enemy towards you and gives you passive armor penetration, boosting your damage, similar to Cleave's Assault 3. Now, one of the champions I am most excited to actually get a legend, though, has got to be Alois. I mean, Dr. Mundo. He appears on Dr. Mundo Expert, which gains might equal to the number of cards in your trash, and makes you recycle 3 of them at the start of each turn. Mundo is a bit of a goofy guy. He's this unkillable tank whose ultimate juices him up with a ton of chemicals and gives him a bunch of health and regen for 10 seconds. But once this is done, he will return to normal, and that's kind of what we see here. The cards in your trash are all the chemicals that he's using, and at the start of the turn, he is shrinking back down to normal. Next up, we have Darius's brother, Draven. Draven is a gladiatorial executioner who loves being flashy and putting on a show for the crowd. The most important thing for him is gaining fame and notoriety, and that is really well demonstrated in his cards. Starting with his legend, Draven Glorious Executioner, this lets you draw a card whenever you win a combat, aka him gaining fame and notoriety for winning events in the arena. And all three of his champion cards, Draven Showboat, Vanquisher, and Audacious, all lean into this as well. Showboat gets stronger the more points you score. Vanquisher makes gold whenever he wins combat, and can fight dirty by boosting himself right before a fight. And Audacious earns extra points or gives up a point depending on if he wins or loses his fights. Of course though, Draven's most iconic ability is his spinning axe though. While it's active, Draven's axes or auto attacks will bounce off of his opponents, and each time he catches one, this ability will reset and he gets a stack of Adoration. These Adoration stacks will be cashed in the second he actually kills an enemy champion, and he'll get a bunch of gold based on how many stacks he's accumulated. Which leads into both the Legend and Vanquisher abilities that we talked about earlier, which allow him to get resources whenever he wins a combat. Regardless though, if he drops the axe, it will go on cooldown. And so his signature gear, Spinning Axe, gives you a ton of stats, but if you drop it, it will destroy itself at the start of your turn. But Draven also has a second ability that makes it into RIftbound, and that is his W, Blood Rush. This gives him a short burst of attack and movement speed for a second, and it will get its cooldown reset if he catches a Spinning Axe. So Blood Rush's card gives Assault 2, which is the stat boost, and can be repeated, which is the reset. Next up is Echo, the boy who shattered time. He made a tool called the Z Drive, which lets him rewind time for a few seconds so that he can work towards a better future. Though any damage that he picks up stays with him, which differs in levels depending on the medium that we're using. Echo Recurrent is a card that can rush in like the hero that he wants to be, and if he dies, sacrificing himself, you can ready all of your runes, effectively turning back their time to the start of the turn. And keeping on that theme of altering time, we have invert timelines, rewriting each player's hand and having them draw until they have 4. And of course, Time Warp gives the player an extra turn. Then there is the Zero Drive itself. Like I said, it's a device that allows Echo to affect time, and the card fits into that pretty well. This is an equipment that gives the unit it's attached to a death knell effect, which banishes it when it dies, taking it out of time for a short period. But the Zero Drive can also banish itself to return all those units back to the game and bring them back to their own time. Lastly, Echo appears on Called Shot, allowing him to choose which future he wants to follow, by looking at the top card of your deck and putting one to hand and recycling the other. And of course, it can be repeated because repeating is kind of Echo's whole thing, like it's even in the name. Following Echo is Ezreal, a famous explorer from Piltover who searches for relics from lost civilizations. While in the ruins of Shurima, he finds one of these, which is one of the gauntlets of Horok, and it allows him to fire blasts of magic and teleport short distances. The other gauntlet currently belongs to Kassadin. Ezreal's legend card, the Prodigal Explorer, leans into this idea of magic and digging through ruins. More specifically, if you have targeted enemy units twice this turn, he allows you to draw a card, digging through your deck. This is reiterated in Ezreal Prodigy, allowing you to discard a card and draw 2, as well as harnessing magic by making your spells and abilities cheaper. Meanwhile, Ezreal dashing is more about his actual kit from League. His Q, Mystic Shot, lets him poke from a distance, which is why dashing's ability allows him to hit an enemy before they get too close to him. Then there's his E, Arcane Shift, which lets him warp a short distance away and move to safety while hitting an enemy. We can also see this escape feature in Dashing's second ability, which allows him to move to your base at action speed. And speaking of Arcane Shift, this is also Ezreal's signature spell, which is exactly what I just described. It lets him vanish before appearing again, while also poking an enemy unit for a bit of extra damage. With that, let's go on to Fiora. She is a fencer from Demacia who dueled her father to restore her family's honor, and now searches for a worthy opponent so that she can prove her abilities in the future. And along those lines, Fiora's cards are largely about 1v1 combat, fencing, and becoming mighty. Starting with her legend card, Fiora Grand Duelist, who allows you to channel a rune whenever one of your units become mighty, growing in fame and influence as she proves herself to be powerful. On a similar note, both Fiora Victorious and Fiora Worthy also care about becoming mighty. Victorious gets a bunch of abilities once she is strong enough, with ganking being related to her dash attack Lunge in League, and Shield and Deflect both being similar to her Riposte ability, which we'll talk about shortly. Fiora Worthy readies her mighty allies, which you could see as her guiding House Laurent now that she is in charge of it. Meanwhile, Fiora Peerless is all about that 1v1 combat, reaching her potential and doubling her might when she's in a fair duel. Back to Riposte though, in League, this ability parries all incoming damage and debuffing effects, then fires an attack back at her opponent. And if she would have been immobilized, this also becomes enhanced and stuns whoever hits it, which is perfectly brought over to her signature spell in Riftbound, where Riposte counters any spell, and the stronger that spell is, the stronger the boost that it gives one of your units as well. Finally, Fiora appears on the Art of On Guard, which is fitting for a fencer, and gives a large boost to a unit who fights alone, which, as we've talked about, is in line with her mechanics. Next out, we have my beautiful baby boy Fizz, the biggest bastard in the game and one of my favorite champions. Fizz is just kind of a fishy Yordle who is notoriously annoying to deal with. However, I wouldn't really say that any of his abilities or lore are directly related to the Riftbound card. The best I can come up with is the idea of him living in the deep, and so he kind of pulls spells from the trash. I guess, I don't know, man, like, I'm trying to do my best here. This could also be a way to play in on Fizz being a trickster, as the card name suggests, and having access to a whole slew of spells or a bag of tricks when he comes into play could be in line with that motif as well. On to Galio, a Petricite statue from Demacia that came to life for a moment to protect their army. Galio doesn't get his own unique card, however he does appear in the background of Rally the Troops alongside Lux, Garen, and J4, showing the strength of the Demacian army by buffing new units the turn that they enter. I chose Galio in particular for this, as I think that it fits the protection that he gives his allies when he enters an area with his ultimate. But overall, this is more of a Demacia regional card rather than any specific unit. Another champion without their own card is Gangplank, and we're going to be focusing on his ultimate ability here. The card Cannon Barrage deals 2 damage to all enemy units in combat, and as I said, this is named after Gangplank's ultimate, which is a global ability that allows him to choose any location in the game and rain a barrage of cannonballs onto it that deal damage to enemies in that spot. With that, we have returned back to the Proving Ground set with Garen, another champion that is function over flavor. Garen is effectively the Demacian equivalent of Darius. He is the leader of Demacia's Dauntless Vanguard, and so in general we are working with the idea of leading a military force. And that makes sense when we look at his legend Garen, Might of Demacia, which allows you to draw 2 cards if you conquered a battlefield with 4 or more units. Basically meaning if you conquered with a small army. And of course, Garen Commander also fits on this theme, giving your other units at his location 1 might. And his other champion card, Garen Rugged, has both Assault and Shield 2, and this one I think actually references his abilities from League. Firstly, his Q, Decisive Strike, empowers Garen's next auto attack, while Courage, his W, gives him a shield and reduces incoming damage for a brief moment, these being Assault and Shield. His signature spell, Decisive Strike, on the other hand, is just back to that commander of an army theme, though again, it is named after his Q, which is not an ability that affects his allies. Though it does give a damage boost, so it kind of follows the theme very loosely. Again, it is just a functional card to show off how the game works to new players. Back to champions without their own cards, and we have Gnar, a prehistoric Yordle who was trapped in Lysandra's true ice for thousands of years. He has his mini form and his mega form that he can turn into when he gets angry, and we see each of these on their own cards. The mini form is present in Primal Strength, which gives a mega-sized might boost, and Wallop, named after his mega form's stun, ironically lets you ready a friendly unit. Our next champion is even less directly shown, and that's going to be Gwen, who was a doll brought to life by the magic of the Hallowed Mist, which contains a fragment of Isolde's soul. Gwen uses Sacred Scissors, which can slice through the Black Mist and its wraiths, and we see these scissors on Sacred Shears. Though while these scissors will eventually belong to Gwen, this is the depiction of when they belonged to Isolde, who was the seamstress that originally sewed the doll. Yes, the card art shows a girl with blue nail polish, however, Gwen is more known to wear gloves, so I don't think it's actually her in this image. Returning with another Yordle, and we have Heimerdinger, who left his kind and founded the city of Piltover to focus on leading the world into an age of science and away from the magic that nearly destroyed Runeterra in the Rune Wars. At his core, Heimerdinger is all about engineering, science, and learning, which brings us to Heimerdinger Inventor, a card that can learn from the gear, units, and legends on your board and copy their exhaust abilities. Back to our legends though, and we have Irelia, one of my least favorite champions in League, but damn is she fun in Riftbound. Irelia is a dancer from Ionia turned into a symbol of resistance against the Noxian invasion after she discovered the ability to manipulate blades through the air with her mind. A massive part of Irelia's character is the theme of fluid motion, and so her cards largely revolve around fluid play. For example, Aurelia Graceful makes your spells cheaper so that you can weave them together more easily, and Aurelia Fervent rewards you for building momentum by getting stronger with each time that she is readied or targeted. But I think that Aurelia's most iconic feature is Blade Surge, her Q ability in League. This allows her to dash to an enemy, dealing damage and healing herself, but if this kills an enemy, she can recast it instantly, letting her chain together several dashes over and over again. And that brings us to her legend card, Aurelia Blade Dancer. Whenever you target a unit, you can use this card's ability to ready them, giving you access to extra movement and combats. Then if you conquer, you can pay to ready your legend and potentially do it again. She is all about chaining together these big motions and building momentum, which is a perfect demonstration of Blade Surge. We also need to talk about her W, Defiant Dance, which becomes her signature spell in Riftbound. This has her charge up an attack for a short period, and while she does, she reduces the damage that she takes. So her card allows you to raise her own might while lowering her opponent's. We also have Janna, an ancient wind spirit who protects the people of Zaun. Originally, she guided sailors and gave them favorable winds, but over time, the needs of Zaun changed. The Undercity became polluted and dangerous, and so she started using her winds to protect them and purify the air as best she could. Fittingly, we have Janna Savior, who can appear at a moment's notice to heal your units and push them back to base. This is directly related to Janna's ultimate, Monsoon, which pushes enemies away and heals your allies. Janna also features in the art for Whirlwind, allowing each player to return a unit to their hand. While not directly representative of Janna's ability, it is pretty similar to her Q, Howling Gale, which creates a tornado and knocks an enemy into the air. And knocking something into the air is kind of like picking up a card and putting it back into your hand, so I'll take it. Jax is an Acathian warrior who travels the world looking for fighters strong enough to fend off the impending void threat. However, when it comes to his own power, he's actually so strong that he chooses to limit himself by fighting with a lamppost, because if he used a real weapon, nothing would ever stand a chance. And that ability to improvise and fight with any weapon are what his Riftbound cards are all about. Starting with his legend, Jax Grandmaster at Arms allows you to equip or move around your equipment pretty much freely. Jax Unmatched allows you to attach your gear directly from hand at reaction speed, and Jax Unrelenting allows you to draw a card whenever you attach an equipment to him. All of this is just in line with the idea of picking up any weapon at any time and making the best use of it possible, or equipping his allies to take on the void. As for his signature spell, we have Counter-Strike. This is Jax's E in League, which has him spinning his weapon above his head and dodging any auto attacks for a few seconds. And in line with that, the Riftbound spell allows a unit to dodge an instance of damage. Now, from a man born way in the past to a man leading Piltover into the future, we're going to be talking about Jace. Jace worked alongside Viktor to perfect Hextech and push the already scientifically advanced Piltover into the future with his technology. And this is pretty much exactly what we see in his card. Jace, Man of Progress, allows you to sacrifice a gear when you play him to get up to a 7 energy discount on one from your hand. Basically, we are getting rid of the old tech and setting up new tech. And fittingly following Jace is Jinx from Arcane. Jinx is a girl from the Undercity with terrible luck. She accidentally wipes out most of her loved ones and is taken in by a murderous revolutionary who fosters her most dangerous impulses, really allowing her to embrace her chaotic side. And in Riftbound, Jinx embraces living dangerously and is rewarded for playing risky without thinking of the consequences, which is best seen in her legend, Jinx Loose Cannon, which lets you draw a card if you start your turn with 1 or less cards in hand. Normally, you want to manage your resources wisely, but she makes it so you don't really need to worry about little things like thinking of the future. Her first champion card, Jinx Demolitionist, makes you discard 2 cards when you play her, but she hits harder than most cards at her cost, and has Assault, and can be accelerated. You hit him fast, and you hit him hard, which is kind of the whole theme about her passive ability, which gives her a huge burst of speed when she gets a takedown. Jinx Rebel also leans into this, as she readies herself and gains a might whenever you discard a card. The more you throw away and destroy, the more she can act. We also have Get Excited, named after this passive ability I just mentioned, which kind of works in a similar way, dealing damage equal to the size of the card that you discard to play it. Again, bigger boom, bigger payoff. As you might expect, Jinx shows up in a decent amount of other cards as well, though two of them have kind of odd representations. Firstly, Switcheroo is named after her Q ability, but doesn't function like it, or even represent that ability in the card's art. I guess you could consider switching 2 units' mights similar to switching weapons, but I don't really think that works here. Meanwhile, Sabotage has what looks like Zap, her shock pistol, which is marked by her spray paint designs and is being held by a girl with pink and blue nails, so it seems like it is Jinx, but then she is sabotaging herself, I guess, which isn't super out of line with her character, but still kind of weird. The other 2 cards are solid fits though. Flame Chompers is her E, a kind of explosive bear trap toy that she makes out of scraps. So when you discard it, she lets you put those scraps to use and play it onto her board. We also have Super Mega Death Rocket, her ultimate ability, which launches a Hextech empowered rocket across the entire map and does more damage the further that her target is. In card form, we return to that idea of building from discarded scraps. It blasts a unit for 5 damage, and if you conquer, you can discard one to remake a new rocket and add it to your hand. Kai'Sa was trapped in the Void as a child and needed to bond with a Void creature that became a powerful symbiotic suit that boosted all of her natural abilities, allowed her to make energy blasts, and protected her from the rest of the Void. It's basically a mix of the Venom symbiote and Alita Battle Angel. In-game, Kai'Sa is a really unique champion, and by hitting different stat milestones, her suit mutates, adapts, and becomes stronger. So, let's start with her legend card. Kai'Sa, Daughter of the Void, allows you to exhaust her to add power to pay for your spells, which I take as her suit empowering her. A big part of Kai'Sa's lore, though, is being able to overcome the Void, becoming stronger as she continues to endure against it. And we see that in each of her champion cards, which reward her for her victories. Kai'Sa Survivor can rush into battle and draws a card when she conquers, while Kai'Sa Evolutionary lets you cast a spell from your trash when she conquers, and this version becomes stronger the more points you score as well, getting access to bigger and bigger spells. Each of these cards comes with their own form of mobility as well. Survivor has Accelerate, while Evolutionary has Ganking, which come from some of her League abilities. Her E, Supercharge, gives her a small burst of speed, accelerating her, if you will, while her ultimate, Killer Instinct, lets her dash to an area close to an enemy that she marks, which is great for ganking. Her other abilities also get cards as well. Her signature spell, Icathian Rain, deals 2 damage 6 times, which is based on her Q, which fires a barrage of missiles at whatever she is close to, while Voidseeker fires a long-range blast that will mark an enemy, which we see in Voidseeker's card dealing damage and allowing you to draw, giving you a benefit. Karma is an ancient Ionian soul that continuously reincarnates to serve as a spiritual leader for her people, which makes it really easy to explain her card, Karma Channeler, who buffs a friendly unit when you recycle, and she also has Vision, which both fit into that whole spiritual leader who empowers her people angle. This idea of recycling is also connected to her reincarnating as well, which is just pretty nice overall. Karthus is an undead sorcerer from the Shadow Isle that worships death and spreads the black mist through his song, which is why he earned the name Death Singer. Fitting to a champion so tied to death, Karthus Eternal makes your death knell triggers happen an additional time. Back to champions without cards, and we have Katarina, one of Noxus's most talented assassins. She has a flair for throwing daggers, and her ultimate, Death Lotus, has her spinning as she throws a flurry of blades at her enemies that are standing nearby. This appears in Flurry of Blades, which deals damage to all units at battlefields. On a very similar note, we have Kayle, one of the twin sisters of Demacia and a daughter of one of the aspects. She is completely obsessed with the idea of justice and is more than willing to kill anyone or anything, even her own forces, in order to attain that justice, which brings us to her ultimate, Divine Judgment. This is an ability that allows her to make one champion invulnerable for a short period of time, while raining down holy blades on all enemies around them shortly afterwards, which is depicted in its card pretty well actually, with each player selecting a small group of their cards and then destroying everything else. On to our first Darken card, Kayn. Kayn is a member of the Order of Shadows who uses a Darken scythe containing Rost. The short version explaining this is that the Darken are essentially corrupted versions of Shuriman Ascendants. I'd say it's like an evil version of Azir, but he is kind of known for genociding an innocent villager too, so I don't know, man, take your pick. Anyways, the Darken were sealed in weapons, and Kayn picks up this scythe with Rost in it, and now he and Rost fight for control of his own body. The card Kayn Unleashed has ganking, and if they're moved twice, they become unable to take damage for the rest of the turn. Ganking already makes sense for most jungle champions, but Kayn in particular, it makes extra sense for, as he's able to literally walk through walls. As for his other ability, that relates to his ultimate, Umbral Trespass. If Kayn has damaged an enemy champion, he's able to dive inside of them, becoming invulnerable and slicing his way out of them soon after. So Kayn makes his first move, attacking the enemy, and once they're damaged, he can dive into them, his second move, which makes him invulnerable, meaning this card is pretty solid. Next up we have Kog'Maw. This little guy is a void creature sent by Malzahar, who wanders around the world trying to consume everything in its path if it finds it interesting. As far as void creatures go, Kog'Maw is actually pretty innocent, but that doesn't make him any less dangerous. What's important here though is his passive, Icathian Surprise. When Kog'Maw dies, he wanders towards his enemies and then explodes soon after. And his card, Kog'Maw Caustic, is pretty similar, dealing 4 damage to units at the battlefield where he dies. Back to some playable legends once again, and first up is Lee Sin, a blind monk from Ionia who channels spiritual energy through his martial arts and became one of Ionia's most respectable warriors through that path. His cards primarily focus on RIftbound's buff mechanics, channeling his spiritual energy to enhance himself and those around him, which is the basis for his legend, Lee Sin Blind Monk, which can exhaust itself to buff one of your units. As for his champions, Lee Sin Ascetic can be buffed infinitely, harnessing more spiritual energy than anyone else, and Lee Sin Centered leaps into battle and strengthens his buffed allies. This likely comes from Lee Sin's W, Safeguard, which has him dashing towards an ally and giving each of them a shield. Of course, his ultimate, Dragon's Rage, becomes his signature spell. In League, Dragon's Rage has Lee Sin kick an opponent away from him, and if they hit another enemy, they will knock them into the air. The card version of this does something pretty similar, moving an enemy to one of their allies' location, and then having each of them deal damage to each other. Continuing on with legends, and we have Leona, the aspect of the sun who is gifted divine armor and radiant magic to take on Targon's enemies. In League, this translates to her stunning her opponents most of the time while empowering herself, which is why her Riftbound cards all revolve around stunning and buffing. Leona Radiant Dawn is her legend, which allows you to buff a friendly unit whenever you stun an enemy. Leona Determined stuns a unit when she attacks, coming from her Q, Shield of Daybreak, which makes her next auto attack stun an enemy. Leona Zealot weakens stunned enemies, which is based on her passive, Sunlight. Sunlight marks enemies when Leona damages them, and her allies can pop that mark to deal extra damage. In other words, Leona weakens them, and her allies can take them out. This card can also come in ready, and that stems from her E, Zenith Blade, which allows her to reach out her sword, briefly root the enemy in place, and pulls Leona towards them, which is usually used to start a fight or to continue it and stop the enemy from escaping. Zenith Blade is also the basis for Leona's signature spell, which stuns an enemy and then moves an ally to their battlefield. Next, we have Lysandra, who doesn't have a proper champion yet, but she is an ancient ice sorceress from the Freljord who made a deal with the Watchers from the Void for power that would allow her to rule. However, she learned the Watchers wanted to erase Runeterra, which gets in the way of ruling, and so she lured them onto the Howling Abyss and froze them in place with True Ice, where she continues to watch over them to this very day. Now, I mentioned True Ice there, which is the ice magic that Lysandra, Ashe, and Sejuani have access to, but I didn't mention Dark Ice, which is the namesake for the card that she appears on, Heart of Dark Ice. Now, this could be a reference to the dark deal she made with the Watchers, but I think it's more likely tied to the Black Frost skin line. This is an alternate future or universe where Lysandra corrupted Freljord champions with her magic, and this enhancement might be why the Heart of Dark Ice card gives a might boost. Like Akshan, Lucian is another Sentinel of Light who dedicates his life to killing the undead from the Shadow Isles. That said, one member of the Shadow Isle in particular is his focus, as Thresh captured Lucian's wife Senna's soul in his lantern. But let's get on to Lucian's card. His legend, Lucian Purifier, gives assault to all of your equipment, which is pretty much what you'd expect for any Sentinel of Light. His champion, Lucian Gunslinger, is pretty similar. He also has assault on his own and deals damage equal to his assault when he attacks. More relics means the Sentinels can fight stronger. His other two cards, though, are based on his E, Relentless Pursuit. Basically, this is just a dash, but every time he autos, its cooldown is lowered. It also triggers Lucian's passive ability, which allows the next auto attack after one of his abilities to shoot twice. Now, firstly, his other champion, Lucian Merciless, readies himself when he conquers, so he moves in, hits the enemy, and can dash away. His signature spell, Relentless Pursuit, is the reverse of this, but it is the same idea. You equip a unit, move it in, and then once they conquer, you can have them dash back to base. Lucian's Q also gets some representation in Piercing Light. This ability has Lucian fire a blast of light through an enemy and hits everything standing behind them as well. The card for this allows you to deal 2 damage to a unit at a battlefield and 2 damage to another unit on top of that, which is the same idea as the League ability. You line them up and you knock them down. It also has repeat because Lucian has 2 guns, I guess. Though it could be a reference to his passive again, which I mentioned doubles up his next auto attacks after using an ability. On Deluxe, where we return to the Proving Ground set. Garen was all about attacking in groups, Ahri was all about low-cost spells, and Lux is about big spells. Again, these are intentionally simple and basic as a priority. Lux is actually Garen's sister as well as a Demacian, and was raised to fear and hate magic, which is an issue because she is a mage. So she learned to control her powers in secret and may have gotten too close with a Demacian prisoner along the way. Lux, Lady of Luminosity, allows you to draw a card whenever you play a spell that costs 5 or more, rewarding Lux for embracing her magic. And we see a similar idea with Lux Illuminated, which gets a 3 might boost whenever you play one of those spells. Her other champion, Lux Crown Guard, helps you cast these spells by giving you 2 energy to do so. All of that makes sense to me, though it is unfortunately a little bit basic. At least her ultimate makes a solid appearance. Final Spark is Lux's most iconic ability, firing a laser of light that hits everything along its path. As a signature spell, Final Spark deals 8 damage to a unit, which again is kind of basic, but I do like that it hits like a truck. Now, we mentioned Malzahar briefly when we talked about Kog'Maw, but basically he is a human prophet who could hear whispers from the void and believed that they would reveal a perfect and inevitable future. He thought that the void would ultimately lead to a world without suffering, and so he began opening portals across Runeterra that allowed the void to slowly seep into it. Malzahar is willing to sacrifice anything and anyone for this goal, which brings us to Malzahar Fanatic, a card that can kill your friendly gear or units to generate power. And our last Proving Ground champion is going to be Master Yi, which means it's the last time you'll have to hear me say that we're working with teachable function rather than flavor. So, finishing off the set into the themes, Ahri was small spells, Lux was big spells, Garen was group attacks, and Yi is defending alone. To showcase that, Master Yi Wuju Bladesman gives a unit 2 might when they are defending on their own. But that actually does fit into his League kit pretty well, at least with his W in particular. Meditate heals Master Yi and massively reduces how much damage he takes, which again, kinda fits. That said, while one of his champions shares a name with this ability, that being Master Yi Meditative, he doesn't actually seem to have much to do with Yi as a character, and is more about function, gaining 4 might when you have 8 or more runes. Luckily, his other champion, Master Yi Honed, does have some solid flavor, despite being so simple. This card comes in ready and has ganking, which is basically high mobility and speed, and fits into his ultimate Highlander, which gives Yi a massive boost of speed and makes him immune to slowing effects. That said, the actual Highlander card and his signature spell doesn't really fit his ultimate. Instead, I think it probably has a bigger connection to his Q, Alpha Strike. This card allows you to select one of your units, and the next time that they die, you can recall them instead. It is not a perfect match, but Alpha Strike in League lets Yi jump to a group of enemies and hit each of them, but while he does this, he can't be hit himself, and it can be used to dodge damage that could kill him otherwise. Sarah Fortune is a famous bounty hunter and pirate captain from Bilgewater who became obsessed with taking revenge on Gangplank after he killed her parents. Eventually, she manages to overthrow him and become one of the most important people in Bilgewater. So let's talk about her cards. Misfortune Bounty Hunter is a legend card that allows you to exhaust her to give your units ganking. Now this doesn't particularly match her kit, but I do think it fits her lore pretty well. Hunting Gangplank wherever he goes is pretty similar for moving one unit from a battlefield to another. If you squint real hard at least, I guess, though it could also be along the lines of a pirate boarding one ship from another. Despite being a largely immobile champ in League, most of her cards do lean into this mobility like this. This theme is followed up with on Misfortune Buccaneer, who allows your units to be played to an open battlefield, as well as Misfortune Captain, who can rush into battle and readies her crew when she moves. Even her ship, the Siren, makes an appearance on a card and allows a unit to move from the battlefield back to their base, which again just adds on to this mobility theme. The most I can really connect this to anything in-game is her W strut. This gives her a decent chunk of move speed while she's out of combat, but that's a pretty loose connection overall. But even so, I still do think that this fits Miss Fortune for some reason. But her signature spell, Bullet Time, is a perfect match for her in-game kit though. Bullet Time's card selects a battlefield and allows you to pay any amount of power to blast a barrage of damage to all of the units at that location. Bullet Time in League is Miss Fortune's ult, which fires several waves of bullets in a cone, and is one of the best abilities in the game when it comes to bursting down an area. Unfortunately, Mordekaiser does not have a card yet, though he does have a spell. Mordekaiser is a warlord who, to simplify his story, believed in a kind of Valhalla, and that he would be rewarded for living a life full of death and battle. However, when he actually died, he was so underwhelmed with the afterlife that he found his way back into the world of the living and began building an army of souls that were eternally bound to him. Which leads us up to his E in League, Death Grasp. This uses Mordekaiser's necromantic magic to pull his enemies towards him, and gets translated into the card Death Grip, letting you sacrifice one unit to empower another, pretty similar to Mordekaiser taking people's souls to make his eternal army. And continuing on with Spooky Boys, next we have Nocturne, a demon who manifested from the nightmares of all things. He is a living shadow that hunts people down in their dreams and feeds on their fear, but he is most known for his ultimate, Paranoia. This makes the whole game go dark for the enemy team and then leaps out at one of them from a distance. And the idea of jumping out of the darkness comes out in his card, Nocturne Horrifying, who can be played when revealed from your deck and jumps out on people from a distance with the ganking ability. On a bit of a lighter note, we have Nunu, a young boy who goes out on search of his mother, along with the help of a magical yeti named Willump. They have a flute which is enchanted with ancient Freljordian magic that allows Nunu to shape ice and snow, which lets Willump make most of his own abilities stronger. This flute, Spellsonger, also gets a card. It is an equipment that doubles the effects of any unit that it's attached to, kind of like how manipulating snow lets Willump roll bigger snowballs than he would otherwise. Sticking in the Freljord, and we have another demigod with Ornn, god of fire, craftsmanship, and the forge. And fitting to this, all of his cards revolve around gear. His legend, Ornn Fire Below the Mountain, can exhaust himself to help you pay for your gear or their abilities. Ornn Blacksmith helps you find your gear, and Ornn Forge God rewards you by getting larger for each gear that you have. All of these are pretty straightforward, so I'm not going to spend much time on them. Of course, Ornn also has the interesting note that he has 3 unique signature gear rather than just one signature card. This comes from his passive in League. As the game progresses, Ornn is able to upgrade his allies' items into his masterworks, essentially souped up versions that only exist while you have the Forge God on your side. And 3 of these are his signature gear in Riftbound. Rabadon's Death Crown is an upgrade of Rabadon's Death Cap that gives an absolute ridiculous amount of magic damage, and so its card boosts how much spell damage you do. Forgefire Crest is an upgrade of Sunfire Cape, though it gets renamed to Forgefire Cape in Riftbound, which honestly is a better name for it, I think. This item in League burns all the enemies nearby you, which is pretty much what the card does as well. And finally, Shrelia's Requiem is the masterwork version of Shrelia's Battle Song. This gives you and your allies a big burst of movement speed, which gets translated into readying your units and giving them ganking. Ornn also appears on the spell Bellows Breath, which lets you hit multiple enemies at a location. This comes from his W ability, which has him breathing fire as he walks forward, with the last burst of flames also having an added effect to it, which I guess you could count as the repeat trigger that the card has. Next, we have a few champions without proper cards, first of which, Pantheon. This was a mortal named Atreus who became the celestial aspect of war. He's all about fighting against the odds, which brings us to the card that he appears on, Against the Odds, a spell that gives you more might based on the amount of enemies that you are taking on. Of course, we also have his sphere, the Skyfall of Arion, which appears on an equipment that makes your hold triggers activate when you conquer, and vice versa. And thematically, that's pretty fitting for Pantheon. He is a man who conquers the battlefield and holds the line against gods, aspects, and Darkin alike. Similarly, Poppy also doesn't appear in her own card, but is seen on Last Stand. Poppy is a Yordle who fights for Demacia and dedicates her life to finding the hero that can save her nation, not realizing that she is the hero. Importantly, the hammer that she uses belongs to her friend Orlin, who was killed protecting Demacia, which is fitting to the card Last Stand, which doubles a unit's might, but sacrifices them at the start of your next turn. Qiyana is an elemental mage from the nation of Ishtal, where despite being the youngest princess of the royal family, she believes that she deserves to inherit the throne and will do anything in her power to prove that she is superior. A large part of Qiyana's kit is her versatility. Depending on the environment that she finds herself in, be it brush, river, or terrain, she gets different effects that apply to her abilities. And we kinda see that in her card as well. Qiyana Victorious allows you to choose between drawing a card or channeling a rune when she conquers, sort of sticking with that versatile theme. Meanwhile, Deflect could be representative of how she sees herself as above others, swatting away their efforts to target her. Like many before, our next champion does not appear on an actual champion unit. Quinn is a Demacian ranger knight who fights alongside her bird partner Valor. In line with being a scout who tries to stay out of harm's way, we have the card that they appear on being Unyielding Spirit, which prevents all spell and ability damage for the rest of the turn. Back to our legends for a bit, and we have Rek'Sai, a void monster known as the Queen of the Xerxai Desert, who is famous for burrowing under the ground with her brood and launching surprise attacks on their prey. As such, many of her cards work alongside the mechanic that we saw with Nocturne, with the idea of surprise attacks being demonstrated by being played from the top of the deck. And Rek'Sai Void Burrower leans into this. Whenever you conquer, she can be exhausted to reveal the top 2 cards of your deck and allows you to play one of them. And we see just about the same effect in Rek'Sai Swarm Queen, who allows you to trigger this effect when they attack. Though if you play a unit, you can add them to her attack as well, which is fitting to the leader of a brood. We also have Rek'Sai's signature spell, which is named after her ultimate, Void Rush, which has her mark an enemy and then launch an attack from the ground that dives onto them. That said, we are pretty much seeing the same effect as the previous 2 cards. Look at the top 2 cards of your deck, choose to play one, and you get a bit of a discount this way before drawing the rest. The other Rek'Sai champion, Rek'Sai Breacher, makes me think of her W, Burrow, which creates a tunnel that she can dive through or that her brood would be able to travel through as well in the actual story. And as such, this card has Accelerate and can give that ability to your units that aren't played from hand as well. Honestly, her whole package is very one note, however, that note fits Rek'Sai's theme extremely well, so I'm not too upset about it. Rel is a metal-bending warrior from Noxus who was raised as a weapon and experimented on in secret by the Black Rose. However, once she realized what was happening, she rebelled, escaped, and began to hunt down the Black Rose to take revenge. Now, in line with this control over magnetism, we have Rel Magnetic, a unit that allows you to attach a piece of equipment to her when she attacks. We also have Renata Glask receiving a legend. She is a chem baron from Zon who built an empire on advanced chemtech, as well as the willingness to exploit, kill, and manipulate others. Which brings us to her cards, which largely revolve around making gold. Renata Glask Chem Baroness allows you to make a gold whenever you hold a battlefield, and enhances your gold to produce energy when you're close to winning. Basically, she bides her time raising resources, and then uses those at the opportune moment to take over the game. Both of her champions also fit into this. Renata Glask Mastermind allows you to spend your gold to either draw a card or score a point, while Renata Glask Industrialist allows your tokens to come in ready, meaning you don't have to wait to spend your resources. And of course, her signature spell, Hostile Takeover, is based on her ultimate. In League, this ability has Renata spray a cloud of powerful chemicals that force everyone it hits into attacking whatever is closest to them, typically turning the enemy team against each other, which is what we see in the RIftbound card as well. This lets you take control of an enemy unit for the turn, and to add to the sneakiness, this card can also be hidden, and can score you a point if your opponent is overextended. Rengar is yet another Vestayan champion, this time from the jungles near Ishtal, who lives for hunting and defeating powerful prey. He is pretty much the Predator, if the Predator was a furry. But the important part here, though, is Rengar's passive ability, Unseen Predator, or his ultimate, Thrill of the Hunt. In Unseen Predator's case, it allows Rengar to leap from a bush to attack his enemies, while Thrill of the Hunt allows you to cloak yourself and leap from anywhere while invisible. In both abilities, though, he is attacking from hiding, which fits his card, Rengar Pouncing, which can be played at reaction speed to join an attack onto your enemies. Back to our legends, though, and we have Rumble, an inventor from Bandle City known for building a combat mech from junk and scrap metal. In line with that, Rumble's cards all revolve around mechs and tuning them up. Rumble Mechanized Menace gives them all shield. Rumble Scrapper gives them 1 might and makes more mech tokens. and Rumble Hot-Headed gives mechs Assault and lets you scrap your units to rebuild mechs from your trash. Similarly, his signature spell Danger Zone gives all of your mechs 1 more might, and can be repeated as well. All pretty simple, but again, pretty fitting nonetheless, kind of in the same vein as the Rek'Sai cards. Sett is a half-human, half-Vestian boy who grew up poor and fought his own way through Ionia's underground fighting pits until he worked his way up the ranks and became the boss of the entire criminal fighting circuit, all so that he could make enough money for his mom to live in comfort. So if we are fighting in the pits, we gotta be resilient, and that's where his cards come in. Sett the boss allows you to save one of your buffed units each turn, and if you conquer a battlefield or win a pit fight, he can do it again. His 2 champion cards also lean into this buffing theme, with Sett Kingpin getting 1 might for each of your buffed units at his location, and the fact that he has tank shows his willingness to fight head-on and protect his underlings, the buffed units that give him power. Meanwhile, Sett Brawler comes into play with a buff, can spend it to become stronger, and then can pick up another buff whenever he conquers. And all of this is pretty in line with that fighting storyline. 2 of his abilities also make it into cards as well. His ultimate, Showstopper, grabs an enemy and leaps into the air, and then slams them into the ground. This becomes his signature spell, which buffs a unit and then moves it to a battlefield. Kind of the reverse of what the League ability does, but in the end, you're still killing the enemy. Meanwhile, Facebreaker, his E, pulls enemies in towards him. If he grabs an enemy on each side of him, he will stun them both, which is what we see in Facebreaker in RIftbound, stunning an enemy unit and a friendly unit at a battlefield. Shen is the leader of the Kinku Order in Ionia, who is charged with maintaining the balance between the spirit realm and the physical world. But in League, he's best known for protecting his allies and being difficult to hit. The latter is the result of his W, Spirit's Refuge. This channels energy through his Spirit Blade and creates a zone where enemy auto attacks are immediately blocked. Spirit's Refuge's card works kind of similarly. It lets you buff an ally and then gives all of your buffed friendly units deflect. As for Shen himself, he appears on Shen Kinku, who, like Rengar earlier, can be played at reaction speed and protects his allies through the tank and shield abilities. This is a reference to his ultimate Stand United, which has Shen teleport to an ally and give both of them a shield that is stronger based on how damaged that ally is. That said, Stand United also gets a card, and similar to Spirit's Refuge, it focuses on buffs, this time doubling the effectiveness of friendly buffs for the turn. Sivir is a champion that we mentioned while talking about Azir. She is his descendant who made a name as a prolific mercenary and treasure hunter. Sivir Battle Mistress allows you to make a gold gear by exhausting her whenever you recycle one of your runes, and if you kill a unit, she readies herself so you can do it again. This hits both the treasure hunter and mercenary elements of her story. Her first champion, Sivir Ambitious, combines a few of her League abilities. Firstly, Deflect comes from her E, Spell Shield, which absorbs the first ability that would hit her. And second, Ricochet, her W, bounces her auto attacks from target to target for a few seconds, which we see in her Conquer ability, which sends excess damage to other enemies. We are going to hop over to her signature spell for a bit before hitting her other champion. On the Hunt readies all of your units, and comes from her ultimate ability of the same name, which gives a massive move speed buff for a short duration. And we see a similar theme in Sivir Mercenary having Accelerate and being able to gain ganking. Sona is a mute musician who communicates with the world around her with her music. However, she also channels her magic through her melodies to inspire her allies and fend off her enemies. And this idea of inspiring her allies extends to her player in RIftbound as well, with Sona Harmonious, who readies 4 of your runes at the end of your turn. Soraka is a celestial known as the Star Child, who took on a mortal form so that she could heal the suffering people of Runeterra, even knowing that healing others caused herself pain. Her card, Soraka Wanderer, really fits this support theme as well. If any other of your units would die at her location with less might than she has, you can heal and recall them instead. And since we are legally obligated to protect our healers, she needs to be dealt damage last. Continuing on that support train, and we have Taric, a Demacian soldier who became the aspect of the Protector after climbing Mount Targon. With his new cosmic powers, he began protecting life and beauty across the world, and this theme comes across in Taric Protector, a unit with both shield and tank. However, he also gives other friendly units at his location shield as well, which is a reference to his W, Bastion, which tethers him to an ally and gives both of them an armor boost. On to the living global taunt himself, Teemo. Despite being adorable, Teemo is a bit of a famous war criminal, scout in Bandle City, known for carrying out some of their most dangerous missions. There's a few things that Teemo in particular is known for in League though, those being stealth, poisonous mushrooms, and blinding effects. The stealth element comes across really well as the focus of the hidden mechanic in RIftbound. Teemo Swift Scout allows you to play hidden cards for energy rather than power, and allows you to place one of your Teemos into your hand from the board or champion zone. Teemo Scout can be played from hidden and gains 3 might the turn it is played, which is based on his passive Guerrilla Warfare. If Teemo stops moving for a short time, he becomes invisible and gains attack speed when he reveals himself from hidden. And speaking of Guerrilla Warfare, that is Teemo's signature spell as well, which allows you to return a few hidden cards from your trash to your hand and hide them for free that turn. Again, we're leaning into that stealth theme pretty hard here. Teemo's second champion, Teemo Strategist, is based on his ultimate ability, Noxious Trap. This has Teemo hiding explosive, poisonous mushrooms around the map. Enemies really have no way of knowing where or how many traps will be along their path, and as such, when this Teemo defends, you can reveal the top 5 cards of your deck and deal damage equal to the number of mushrooms or hidden cards that your opponent runs into. Teemo's Mushroom Pouch also appears on, Mushroom Pouch, and lets you draw a card at the start of your turn if you are hiding a card. Following Teemo is Trundle, the Freljordian Troll King who reunited the Troll tribes. Along with being fairly clever for a troll, he also has immense strength and power thanks to his club, which is made of true ice, the same magic that gives Lysandra, Ashe, and Sejuani their powers. Speaking of his club, that is Bone Shiver, and in Riftbound, this allows you to channel a rune when you conquer, giving you the kind of power that the club gives Trundle. Yet another Freljordian king is Tryndamere. When he was young, his entire tribe was slaughtered by the Darkin Aatrox, and this filled Tryndamere with so much rage that he became able to keep fighting, even while mortally wounded. That said, while being too angry to die is what he is most known for, his card, Tryndamere Barbarian, instead focuses on the fact that he hits like an absolute truck, thanks to his passive Battle Fury. This gives him a chance to crit based on his Fury, and when he deals 5 or more excess damage, you can score a point. Speaking of Fury, Tryndamere also appears on the card Blind Fury. This says that each opponent reveals the top card of their main deck, and then you can choose one and play it, ignoring its cost before recycling the rest. This doesn't have very much to do with Tryndamere himself, but I guess you could consider getting lucky on this ability to be like getting a crit, which is related to his passive, I guess. I don't know, kind of grasping at straws with this one. Our next champion, though, is Twisted Fate, who is related to one of the most underdeveloped cards and one of the best cards in the game. Twisted Fate Gambler is a con artist from Bilgewater that uses enchanted cards and teleportation to outsmart his opponents. But for the purpose of this video, we only need to focus on 2 of his abilities. Pick a card, his W, which allows him to select from 3 different cards for different effects. Blue returns mana, red does area of effect damage, and yellow stuns. And that's pretty much what we see in Twisted Fate Gambler. When he attacks, you reveal the top card of your rune deck, blue lets you draw a card, red deals damage to enemies at a battlefield, and yellow stuns, even if the yellow ability is currently impossible to use in the game. His E is Stack Deck, which makes every 3rd auto attack deal bonus damage. In other words, every 3rd card you throw. The damage part doesn't follow through, but the card Stack Deck still deals with sets of 3 cards, allowing you to add one of the top 3 cards of your deck to your hand. And at the very least, it is pretty in line with who he is as a character though. Udyr is a spirit walker from the Freljord that can channel the spirits of animals to gain their strength in battle, with 4 stances being represented in League, and these get shown off in Udyr Wildman, who can spend his buff to activate one of 4 different effects. Vayne is a monster hunter from Demacia who swore vengeance against all forms of dark magic when her entire family was murdered. This eventually escalated to taking on the undead from the Black Mist after becoming a Sentinel of Light during the Ruination. She appears on Vayne Hunter as a mix of a few of her abilities. Her passive, Night Hunter, gives her move speed when moving towards an enemy champion, which is why she comes in ready if your opponent controls a battlefield. The rest of her card comes from her Q, Tumble, which is a roll that empowers her next auto attack. That is the Assault 3 that you have on this card. It also allows you to turn invisible during her ultimate, which you could consider being the return to your hand effect, tumbling away after conquering. Vex is a gloomy Yordle mage who can channel her magic through her living shadow companion. Vex's passive, Doom and Gloom, is where we get her card's inspiration. She can empower her own abilities with Doom, causing her enemies to be afflicted by fear. And she can also afflict enemies with Gloom, which makes them vulnerable to Vex's next attack. Which is why her card, Vex Cheerless, makes her enemy spells cost more and her friendly ones cost less while she's in combat. Vi is Jinx's adopted sister, who was locked away in prison after Jinx accidentally killed everyone they knew and loved. Oops. And she ends up working for the Piltover Enforcers after she is released. However, she gets a bit of a power-up when she gets the Hextech power gauntlets that Jace invented. Vi Destructive takes inspiration from her Q, Vault Breaker. This has her charge up a powerful punch and launch herself at an enemy. In Riftbound, this involves her recycling cards from your trash, charging up, and gaining might for her next big attack. She also has ganking, as that's kinda her whole thing. Between her Q and her ultimate, Vi is like 50% gap closers, she's gonna be ganking. I also like that her Riftbound ability has her commit to actions before the combat begins. She has to punch first and think later, and hey, Punch First is also a card featuring her gauntlets, and that gives a unit 5 might, being the power that the gauntlets give her. Viktor is a Zon scientist who comes in contact with the Hex Core and is warped by it. He becomes the herald issuing in the Glorious Evolution, aiming to push biological life into a mechanical singularity. Viktor, Herald of the Arcane, can be exhausted to create a recruit token, which is Viktor spreading the Glorious Evolution. His champion cards also share in this, and each of them creates recruits under different circumstances. Viktor Innovator makes one when you play a card during your opponent's turn, while Viktor Leader makes one when your non-token units die. I think these are really cool as they show off the two different paths towards the Glorious Evolution. One being productive and resourceful, while the other sacrifices living beings to create his army. Along the lines of absorbing life, we also have Siphon Power, Viktor's signature spell which raises his allies' might while lowering his enemies. This comes from Viktor's Q of the same name, which damages an opponent and gives himself a shield and an enhanced auto attack. His E also gets a card with Hextech Ray that deals 3 damage. Meanwhile, in League, this is a blast of energy that drags along the ground. Our next legend is Volibear, who is our final entry into the Freljordian Demigod Club. In this case, being a Freljordian Demigod Cub? Volibear is the god of storms, strength, and nature's fury, but unlike his brother Ornn, he hates modern society. Volibear's cards largely revolve around those themes of storms and strength. Volibear Relentless Storm lets you channel a rune by exhausting him when you play a mighty unit, showing your dedication to strength. And speaking of strength, Volibear Imposing is a towering unit that has tank and shield to fend off attackers, but also who punishes your opponents for moving their units to a battlefield by letting you draw a card. Meanwhile, the Storm comes in with Volibear Furious, a unit that deals 5 damage split among his enemies when he attacks. This also leans into Volibear's passive, Relentless Storm, which can make his auto attacks spread lightning for up to 5 different units. Volibear's ultimate, Stormbringer, has him jump forward and deal massive damage, while also turning off any turrets that are nearby. So similarly, his signature spell of the same name blasts the battlefield for damage and then has a unit jump into it. We also have Volibear's E, Sky Splitter, as a card. Sky Splitter calls lightning that damages an opponent and shields Volibear if it hits him. This card is pretty similar, dealing damage to a unit at a battlefield, though also giving you a discount based on the biggest unit that you have. Warwick is the result of a man named Vander being left for dead and kept alive thanks to genetic chemtech enhancements that turned him into an uncontrollable wolfman that is drawn to the smell of blood, which makes for an easy lead-in to his card, Warwick Hunter, which kills damaged enemy units at a battlefield when he attacks into it. Xin Zhao is an Ionian who was captured and forced to fight as a gladiator in Noxus. He ultimately earned his freedom and was rescued by King Jarvan II of Demacia before going on to serve as the king's most trusted protector. Xin Zhao Vigilant shows off this responsibility and the need to take action to protect the king. He has tanks so that he can take the hit first, and enters the field ready if you have others that are worth defending in your base. Our final actual legend is Yasuo, a swordsman who can control the wind with his blade. He was falsely accused of murdering his master during a Noxian invasion and was forced into exile. In League though, Yasuo is known to be one of the most mobile champions in the game thanks to his ability to dash through his enemies. Yasuo Unforgiven allows you to move a friendly unit to or from your base to lean into that mobility theme. Yasuo Windrider rewards you for embracing this mobility, riding the wind, by scoring an extra point if he moves multiple times. And Yasuo Remorseful is the result of combining his dash and his Q. After dashing through someone, Yasuo can immediately use his Q to create a spinning dash attack, which is why Remorseful deals damage when he moves into a battlefield. Yasuo's W, Wind Wall, also appears on a card. This ability creates a, wall of wind, which negates any projectile that touches it, so in Riftbound, it can be used to counter any spell. And finally, his ultimate, Last Breath, has Yasuo jump to an airborne enemy and strike them several times before they hit the ground. I think the Last Breath card fits his ability to throw tornadoes at enemies a little bit better than this, but either way, the card readies a unit and then deals damage equal to their might to an enemy at a battlefield. Our penultimate champion is Yasuo's brother, Yone. Yasuo accused Yone of framing his master's murder on him and ultimately kills Yone in a duel as a result. However, once in the spirit realm, Yone is attacked by an Azakana, a demon that feeds off of negative emotions. Once he kills this demon, he is resurrected and the demon's mask is bound to him, and so Yone now uses this second chance at life to hunt down other Azakana. He appears in Yone Blademaster, and his ability mirrors Yasuo Remorseful. Rather than dealing damage to a unit at a battlefield, if Yone conquers an empty battlefield, he can strike a unit in the enemy base. This likely comes from his Q, Mortal Steel, which is a dash attack that can throw a slice of wind forward. And finally, Yorick, a Shadow Isle monk who survived the ruination thanks to the sacred water that he carries on him. Yorick is the shepherd of souls that guides restless spirits and raises mistwalkers to fight the undead. His Q, Last Rites, can enable him to raise corpses to fight for him, and the card that we see for this ability is an equipment with a similar effect. To attach it, you need to recycle units from your trash, which you could see as guiding spirits. And when the attached unit conquers or holds, you can play a unit from your trash, raising the Mistwalkers. And with that, we have officially covered all 200 plus champion and item referencing cards in the Proving Grounds, Origins, and Spiritforge sets. Let me know if I missed any. It's very possible. There's a lot of cards as it turns out. And if you'd like to see a similar video when the next set comes out, let me know that in the comments as well. With all that being said, I hope you enjoyed. If you did, remember to leave a like and subscribe. I will see you all in the next video though.